Because Nicolas Cage was a really big deal in 2008. He was a major, major star. His star has kind of plummeted since then also.
God damn it!
Hey guys, in today's video we're going to talk about the Mickey Rourke classic, The Wrestler. With me, my guest is Evan Ginzburg, an associate producer on the film. Make sure to check out one of his more recent projects. He was also a producer on 350 Days. It's a great documentary talking about the wrestling world and essentially how they're on the road 350 days of the year, which is insane. But anyway, all information on that, I'll link the website 350daysthemovie.com in the description below. Check that out. But in this video, we're going to talk about the time Nicolas Cage was almost cast as the wrestler instead of Mickey Rourke and why he wasn't. All kinds of cool behind-the-scenes stuff. And then talk about hardcore wrestling, talk about the dark side of wrestling, talk about all kinds of things associated with the wrestling world. Anyway, if you like this kind of content, please help support the channel by hitting the like button, subscribing, and sharing the video. Let's talk about, a few things. Obviously, The Wrestler. So first, you were an associate producer on that. How exactly did you get involved in that project?
Yeah, I was an agent in professional wrestling, meaning I booked various legends for autograph appearances and personal appearances and such. And I was at a wrestling store, so wrestling memorabilia. And I had Johnny Valiant from the Valiant Brothers, and he was also Johnny V, Brutus Beefcake, and Greg Valentine's manager back in the 80s. And I had Nikolai Volkov, and we were having a great time just meeting the fans and signing autographs. And all of a sudden, the executive producer, and people get confused with these titles, the executive producer is the money guy. Okay. So the executive producer's best buddy comes in. And he's like, you guys will be perfect. Darren Aronofsky's working on this wrestling project. And, we have to all meet and connect. And, I took it with a grain of salt because you go to these appearances and people, always giving you their business cards and pitching something. And months went by where we didn't hear anything. And all of a sudden I get a call. Next thing I know, I'm in a meeting with Aronofsky, the executive producer, Scott Franklin, the screenwriter, etc. And I have Nikolai and Johnny Valiant and another late wrestler, Tiger Khan, with me, and Nikolai's manager at the time, Nikita Brezhnikov. And we just hit it off. I mean, Nikolai was, he's gone now. Nikolai was such a warm, friendly guy, down to earth, regular guy. Lovely person. And Johnny did stand-up. Johnny was just plain funny. And if you're too young, but the Valiant Brothers, basically it was like improv. Captain Lou, Jimmy Valiant, Johnny Valiant, they would have all day promos. They would cut promos, and basically they would say, okay, Madison Square Garden, June 6, 1974, you guys are wrestling Bruno Sammartino and Chief Jay Strongbow. Boom, cut a promo, total improv. And they're riffing off of each other like jazz musicians, So Johnny was just funny. And so we hit it off. And next thing I know, Evan, I get a call from the executive producer, Scott Franklin. Evan, I'd like you to be, the wrestling guy. Basically anything wrestling related on the film. So I did the wrestlers' casting calls, bringing in the various talent. I got the ring, I got Mickey Rourke's trainer, etc. So on. Basically anything at all wrestling related and more interesting to the general audience. There were multiple scripts, and these were casual 1980s Hulkamania, Roddy Piper, rock and wrestling. Fans, Aronofsky and his crew. These were not quote unquote wrestling guys. I was the wrestling guy. Okay. So I would get the scripts, and in one scene in the original script, Mickey's blading himself. In wrestling, you have a little hidden blade. You cut your forehead open, the blood pours, and it was very dramatic back in the day. They cut that out now. It's not politically correct or even safe technically, you know. So in the original script, Mickey blades himself, or Randy the Ram, I should say, blades himself, and everybody's watching. And I said to Darren, nobody would watch, nobody would care. It's another day at the office. They did this every night. And if you look at the old school wrestlers, their forehead is like a map of scar tissue, you know, like totally destroyed from every night, 300 plus nights a year, you know, cutting your head open with a razor blade. Okay. And what a lot of your viewers, listeners may not know is, a lot of these guys never broke $100 grand. They're main eventing Madison Square Garden, they're main eventing Boston Garden, Philadelphia Spectrum, etc., so on. You know, so imagine in 1975, you know, Mick Jagger and the Stones, Elton John, Rod Stewart, you know, The Who, etc., so on, are main eventing Madison Square Garden. They're making more than $100 grand a year. Sure. You know, these wrestlers were exploited. And part of the script of the wrestler was, you know, these guys do not end well for the most part. It's better today than it was, you know, 40, 50 years ago, but a lot of these guys don't end well.
Yeah, you know what's crazy? There's so many of them that you read about and hear about that, like, have unfortunately died in their 40s, which is crazy. That's young.
Yeah. The guy I mentioned who I brought to the initial meeting with Aronofsky was my friend Tiger Khan, who wrestled for the Hearts up in Calgary, 33 years old. One of my dearest friends in the world, 33 years old, went to sleep, didn't wake up, you know? It was the quote unquote, we call it the wrestling lifestyle. Steroids, party drugs, alcohol, 33 years old. And I tell people it was the worst day of my life getting that phone call. He was one of my closest friends. So I've lived this repeatedly in wrestling as an agent, as someone involved in the business in various capacities. And there's a long trail of, as they used to say, young, good-looking corpses.
You play hard, and you burn the candle at both ends. You pay the price for it.
Tragic, yeah.
Yes.
It's a wrestling, boxing, porn, whatever the case may be. When you're using your body to make a living, people are going to exploit you, and for the most part, the majority will not end up well. So think about this. Back in the heyday of, you know, WrestleMania, these guys were on the road over 300 nights a year. Okay, and you could say from here to tomorrow, it's fake, it's fake. Yeah, sure. You know, it's scripted. They know who's going to win. But gravity isn't fake. If I threw you through the air every night and you're landing on your back, your neck, your joints, eventually the human body gives in. And the wrestlers have a term called, there's only so many bumps on your bump card. In other words, at some point, your body is going to give out. And wrestlers hate the word fake because they go, you know, my knee replacement wasn't fake. My hip replacement wasn't fake. My 4 divorces, because I was on the road every night of the year.
Fake.
Oh, that's real.
I think so too.
Wrestling, in the old days, they would have a big event called Starrcade on Christmas night and the Survivor Series on Thanksgiving night. So you're telling your kids and your wife, I'm not going to be home for Christmas or Thanksgiving. I'm not going to be home for Junior's graduation. I'm not going to be home for the birth of my baby. I'm on the road. So the divorces aren't fake. And another thing, you know, you're a young guy, but, you know, you wake up at 40 or 50, and I've had wrestlers say to me, Evan, I'm always in pain. Always.
That's sad. That's sad. Hey, Evan, I'm probably not as young as you think. And people think I look young. People think I look like I'm in my late 20s in the gym, for example. I'm 41. Like, I'm middle-aged.
Well, compared to me, you're young. Yeah.
But, oh, yeah, I'm still young. But, again, I talk to people half my age in the gym, and they'll literally ask me, you know, like, oh, how long have you been working out? And I'll say, longer than you've been alive, which is the truth. And they always give me, like, this look like, what's he talking about? And then they'll keep pressing me, and then they'll be like, really? I can't believe you're that old. I'm like, thanks. But at least I don't look it. But anyway.
It attests to a healthy lifestyle. If you're eating right and exercising right and sleeping right, unlike most Americans, that's why you look 41, and some guys 41 look like they're 51 or 61. No? Oh, really?
And I bring up my age because here's an interesting thing. So I got really into like lifting weights and bodybuilding in the mid 90s, right? And a lot of the guys that I read about in the magazines and stuff, like wrestling, a lot of them have passed in their 40s. And I'm just like, I'm in my 40s. I'm literally in my prime. And these guys, unfortunately, who went like the drug route and all that other stuff and that kind of lifestyle are like gone, which is crazy. Because I still feel so young. And like I mentioned earlier, 40 is young, but these guys aren't even here anymore.
I'll tie this all together, bodybuilding and wrestling. My dear friends, Nicole Bass, who was always on the Howard Stern show, I was there at her deathbed the night before they pulled the plug. Okay? Melissa Coates, another female bodybuilding champion who went into wrestling like Nicole, also died in her early 50s. I mean, she was 52. And she just died a few weeks ago. I mean, this is very fresh and painful. She was at my wedding. She, a champion bodybuilder. And, I don't have to tell you. I mean, sometimes they choose the wrong road also. I mean, what they're putting into their bodies. So,
it definitely takes a toll, unfortunately, man. But going back to wrestling real quick. So I know you mentioned you were like an agent and stuff. So did you just start off as like a hardcore fan? Like, how did you get involved?
Exactly. I was a fan and I started writing for newsletters, sheets. You might call it zines. We call it sheets. And I started writing, and eventually I edited my own. And from there, I got invited onto a 50,000 watt radio station, WBAI FM in New York, part of Pacifica, 99.5 FM. And I was there for 16 years. And, I was a co-host, and my fellow host, Fred Giabo, he loved wrestling. And he's like, let's invite some of the wrestlers on. It's a 50,000 watt station. So sometimes we would interview the wrestlers and even have them down at the station, and they were very colorful and well-spoken and larger than life and great guests. And from there, some of them were like, why don't you book me? And I'm like, well, I've never done that before, but what I've learned in life is one thing always leads to another. And then from being an agent and being on radio, it got me into film. It's, life is, you have to be in it to win it. You have to be out there doing things, and it leads to other things. And sometimes it leads to bigger and better things. And I tell people the best night of my life was, we're at Lincoln Center in New York, the New York Film Festival, one of the most prestigious film festivals in the world. And we're screening The Wrestler. There's 2,300 people in there, sold out, $40 a ticket. The movie ends, and there's a spontaneous standing ovation. And I'm like, we worked off and on this movie for 7 years. And it was very moving to see that, your hard work. And none of us got rich off of it. It was a $6 million budget. Technically, it was an indie film. But to see people crying. Mickey Rourke does a scene with his daughter where he says, I'm just a broken down piece of meat.
And I'm alone. And I deserve to be all alone. I just don't want you to hate me.
And that's like Brando and On the Waterfront. I could have been a contender. I think that's going to be an iconic line, in film. I think 100 years from now, people will watch this film. And I'm not boasting. I'm just proud to be part of it. And I think Mickey's performance was as great as anything anybody's ever going to see. He won the Golden Globe for Best Actor. He was nominated for the Academy Award. Sean Penn beat him for Milk, but the performance is unbelievable, heart-wrenching. So I'm with Mickey Rourke one night, and I said, so Mickey, what did you think of the film? And he goes, I can't watch it. He goes, it reminds me too much of my own life. Because he went from huge film star to like direct to video. You know, like his star had plummeted when he did The Wrestler, and The Wrestler rejuvenated his career. And he's a tremendous actor and a nice person. I mean, you know, you could qualify him as tortured artist or whatnot, but I never saw him say no for an autograph, a picture, you know, shaking hands with the fans. Just a nice guy, you know, and talented. And it was one of the great experiences of my life. And this is a funny story. So I'm on set one day, just hanging out, and Aronofsky gets this smirk, and he goes, Evan, come here. I'm like, okay. So this is the scene where it's this really tragic autograph scene. The guys are there, and there's like no fans. There's nobody there. And so Aronofsky says, Evan, work the room, walk up to Mickey last, ask him for an autograph and a Polaroid. Back then they used to do Polaroids. So Mickey whispers in my ear, he goes, just improv it. He thinks I'm an actor. I never acted in my life.
Okay.
So I do exactly what they told me to do. And I walk up to Mickey last. You know, there were other guys at the tables, mostly extras. And I walk up to Mickey last and I go, I loved you as a kid. I saw you at Madison Square Garden. I'm thinking, like, what would I say to a wrestler? And I go, can I have your autograph? So he looks at me, and we're improvising this. He goes, what's your name? And I'm thinking for a second, and I just go, Evan. And it dawns on me how surreal this is. I'm playing myself in a fictional movie, how utterly surreal this whole thing is. So, hearkening back to the the New York Film Festival, Lincoln Center, I'm sitting in the audience with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I didn't know if it was in the film or on the cutting room floor. And there I am on the screen. My girlfriend looks at the screen and looks at me, looks at the screen. She goes, that's you. I go, yeah. You know, it was just, the whole thing was like miraculous. So we're at the after party, and Aronofsky makes this speech. And Aronofsky's a good guy, man. I'm not just saying it because I worked for him. His mom was a teacher, very down-to-earth guy and a genius. I mean, if you saw some of his other stuff, the guy's brilliant. So he's making this speech, and he goes, quote, I don't know what the fuck we have, but we have something. I'll never forget it. And he was right. I mean, it won all kinds of awards. And, you know, again, very proud of it. And I just, you know, there's a movie called Once. I don't know if you ever saw this. It's almost like a musical set in Europe. And it's about a street musicians, plural. And they win the Academy Award for Best Song. And the movie was shot on 125,000, which is nothing. And they're so emotional, and they go, create art, create art. You know, don't create schlock, don't create product, create art. And The Wrestler is something that will always be around. 100 years from now, you know, somebody will turn on HBO or whatever is streaming or whatever at that point, and there it'll be. And I'll be long gone, but there it'll be.
Yeah, it'll live forever. It's definitely a classic. I actually rewatched it last night because I wanted to get it fresh in my head before I spoke with you. So, like you mentioned, create art, don't create schlock. This is a complaint I have with so many movies, especially because I cover a lot of action stuff and martial arts stuff, and they can't do it like they did in the 80s and 90s, right? You could tell they're making some of these movies strictly because they think they can make a little bit of money. And it's just like, as a fan, I'm so disappointed because it's like, well, first of all, shouldn't you make it for us who's going to spend time and invest our time watching it? We want to be entertained and we want to remember it. We don't want it to just be so disposable. But I feel like they going in, they probably already know, well, they're not even trying to make something people are going to watch 10 years from now or 20 years from now, right? Or like 100 years, like you said, with The Wrestler. And that's the problem I have with so many new movies. You know, it's kind of sad. But
as someone who also loves action films and some of the same guys I see you have on your shelves, Take, for example, Fred Williamson, who's an indie filmmaker. He's the producer, quite often the director, the star. Basically, what he does is it's a business deal. Before the movie's made, he knows he has the rights to hotels, airplanes, cable, streaming, whatever the case may be. Before the movie's even made, it's made a profit. And it's basically, not to say I don't enjoy some of his movies. I mean, he's made some really, Three the Hard Way and, Black Caesar, Hell Up in Harlem. But I'm just saying, movies should be more than a business deal,
I 100% agree. I mean, I get both sides. Like, obviously, a producer or a studio, they have to make money, right? Like, I get that. But the thing is, if you make a great movie, it will make money not just when it's released. It will still make money 20, 30 years after it's released. So if they think of it like that, it's like, well, this thing could just be a cash cow for decades, not like, oh, it'll make a little money when it's released and it's already made the money. Like you said, all these deals are done. They already kind of got their profit, just strictly as a business.
Yeah, like WWE churns out, direct to video, direct to cable movies, and the vast majority of them are mediocre or worse. And it's a shame because they have all the money and talent in the world where they could do better, and they choose not to. It's a product, and it's basically just a cash cow for them. So the most popular films in the world are action films. The number one theme in cinema is revenge. Every Shaw Brothers, every Golden Harvest, every old school Kung Fu movie, you killed my teacher, you killed my wife, you killed my girlfriend, you killed somebody, I'm gonna kill you.
I'm gonna take you to the bank, Senator Trent. To the blood bank.
And it's easy to dub, it's universally enjoyed. Revenge is the number one theme in action films. But you could see these beautiful Shaw Brothers epics. You know who I like that's more recent? Donnie Yen. Donnie Yen's amazing. And he could act. He could actually act. He's not
that's actually pretty important. You need that screen presence and the ability to act, not just be able to do cool jump kicks. You need more than that.
I mean, I love Jet Li. I love Donnie Yen, Jackie Chan. What's better than Drunken Master? 1 and 2, Jackie Chan. I mean, but the point being, for every Drunken Master, there's 100 others that they churned out that schlock.
Sure.
And that's a choice. It's a choice.
Yeah, there's not passion behind a lot of this stuff, unfortunately. But at least there's enough sprinkled here and there that we can always appreciate. Now, going back to The Wrestler real quick, when you said it was kind of like a 7-year project, which is crazy. And here's something I read, basically, that Mickey Rourke was always the first choice for the role, but due to his erratic nature and reputation, the original financing for the film fell through. So I'm guessing that definitely played a part in why it took 7 years. So I know you said the executive producer's like the money guy, but have they talked to you, or do you know why it was like, how did you guys eventually get financing for the film?
Well, we wanted $18 million for the film.
Oh, really? Wow.
Ultimately, we got 1/3 of that because, as I said, Mickey's star was not what it was in 2008 when we finally did it. So one night, Aronofsky has me meet Nicolas Cage. This is a funny story.
Oh, that's funny. I wanted to ask you about this. That's great that it came up.
So we're in the parking lot in the basement of the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York. The Manhattan Center, I believe, where Ring of Honor, the wrestling promotion, was having a show. And he's like, Evan, you be the point man. Because Nicolas Cage was a really big deal in 2008. He was a major, major star. His star has kind of plummeted since then also.
God damn it!
But so he's like, you be the point man. Just get him in without the paparazzi, without any to do. Just get him in and just get him backstage. So I meet Nicolas in the basement in this parking lot, and for like 10 seconds, I'm like, wow, you know, this guy's a big deal. And then I look at his shoes. For whatever reason, I notice his shoes. I'm like, oh, these are just a pair of shoes like anybody else's shoes. I mean, this is just another guy, you know, flesh and blood, you know, and he was nice as could be and down to earth. And so I whisk him back. I whisk him into the elevator, whisk him backstage. And everybody's like, oh my God, it's Nicolas Cage, because he was a really big deal back then. Sure. And he's watching the wrestling and he asks me, he goes, is this like UFC? Is this real? I go, no, it's not. I said, that's the art of it, that they make it look real. So I'm sitting with Aronofsky days later, and Aronofsky's like, Evan, you know, I like Nicolas. And he looked like $1 million at the time. He was like you. He was well built. He was like 44 or so at the time, 43, you know, and Aronofsky's like, quote, he goes, he looks too healthy for the part. Oh, he looks too, because the character was like broken down and beaten up. Sure. And he says to me, Mickey's the right guy. You see, that's an artist speaking. Aronofsky's going, the lesser box office guy was the right guy for this. Not the guy that's going to make us more money, the guy that's going to make the right movie. That's why I respect artists, not schlockmeisters, you know? And we were talking before the show, like right above your shoulder there, JCVD is a great Van Damme movie. But I've also seen some Van Damme movies that were not so wonderful, you know? It's, sure. You know, so again, it's what you're willing to do, what the production company is willing to make, and you know, it's a choice. It's a choice.
Yeah, the casting is so key. I mean, Mickey Rourke was perfect for the part. Obviously, he got nominated for the Oscar, and he's been an amazing actor for so long. But that was the only time he got nominated, so that really says something, right? Now, here's another name that was thrown around that I read anyway. I don't know if there's any truth to it or if you know. Did they mention like Sylvester Stallone possibly playing that role?
No, he was.
That was never like thrown out there.
I never heard that.
Oh, interesting. Because I had read that they kind of threw his name out there, but because he recently come out with Rocky Balboa, it would be more like the same thing of like kind of like the broken guy trying.
I severely doubt that.
Interesting. Put that rumor to rest then.
But I mean, look, I wasn't there for every minute over 7 years. I didn't live in the office, but this was an interesting experience. I was telling somebody about this. I'm sitting with Aronofsky one day, and he takes out these little white index cards like you would use in the public schools. And he has actors and their day rates written on the cards. Okay. He goes, you know, Evan, 3 TV stars are the price of 1 movie star. You know? So a guy like Stallone generally would not come cheap. So I never heard his name in the mix. I love Stallone.
Oh yeah, sure.
I think Rocky's one of the greatest in theater experiences I ever had. You know, seeing that in a movie theater and the fans cheering like they were at an Ali Frazier fight. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, you guys would have definitely needed minimum that $18 million budget for Stallone instead of 6. Now, with that said,
$18 million is like the food budget on the Avengers.
But yeah, I know, right? Yeah. That's funny. But with that said, did you guys have to cut a lot of stuff out or make?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what happened. Yeah. Originally, we were going to do this with extras. And once we lost 2/3 of what we wanted in the budget, those were real fans for the most part.
Oh, really?
This is it. So we would go into a live wrestling show, and these were not like art house cinema guys. These were wrestling fans. So sometimes they were not happy we were interrupting their wrestling show to film the wrestler. And at one point, Aronofsky had to actually get on the mic in front of a hostile crowd and go, guys, we're going to do good by you. Just let us get 1 or 2 shots in, because they just wanted to watch their wrestling show. So this was really like guerrilla filmmaking in certain cases. And we had this really sweet cinematographer, this like nice, quiet, art house cinematographer from Europe. This little lady, I forget her name offhand. It's been 13 years, and she's watching this chaos, this carnage, and this wasn't like doing Bergman or Fellini. You know what I'm saying? This was, you're in the middle of these hostile wrestling fans trying to get your stuff in and get out. It was wild. It was a wild experience. Yeah.
Did Mickey Rourke do all the wrestling in that film, or was there like a stunt guy?
I'm supposed to say yes, but there was a stunt double for some of it, for the real dangerous stuff. But he did get legitimately hurt at one point, because a lot of it he did do. Even Jackie Chan at this point, Jackie Chan's in his early 60s. He's not doing everything. I'm sorry.
I've heard he used stunt doubles back in the 90s even.
Yeah. But, publicly, he's not going to emphasize that.
Sure.
I love Jackie, but I'm just saying Mickey at the time was in his 50s and had never wrestled. He had boxed. Yeah. He was an athlete and he was in great shape, but he was not a wrestler. So he's taking bumps. And when I say bumps, I've tried it myself at wrestling schools. Basically, you're dropping your entire body back onto the canvas, and it's bouncing, and it's like whiplash, and you're doing it again and again and again. And the guy had guts, and he was in his 50s, and guys in their 20s get hurt doing this stuff.
Oh yeah, no doubt, man. That's a rough sport right there. Here's a question. It's a very memorable match. The guy, Necro Butcher, when they had the glass and the barbed wire and the ladder and all that kind of stuff. So do they really have matches like that in real life?
Yeah,
with staple guns and all that? Wow.
They call that hardcore wrestling. And there's a little circuit for that. I mean, it's not mainstream like WWE, but it's sort of like Fight Club. It's like kind of underground. And they'll have like 100 bloodthirsty fans there, and they'll mutilate themselves. These guys have been set on fire. I had a friend, Lowlife Louis Ramos, who did that. His lung collapsed during a match.
Oof.
I mean, and this is not like big money either, believe me. It's like a low-level indie thing. And I'll tell you a funny Necro Butcher story. So Aronofsky's looking for a hardcore guy for that scene. And I suggest Necro Butcher. And we're waiting and waiting and waiting. We had an appointment with him, and he's nowhere to be found. And I tried calling him. We had the little contact information, those little cards. And this is going back 13 years. And I reached his mom. Necro Butcher's mom. This is a guy who mutilates himself for a living. Sure. And now she's like, where's my boy? Where's my boy? Like she's worried now. This is a guy who like staples his head with staple guns, So Necro Butcher is super late. I'm talking like 2.5 hours late. Aronofsky's finally like, Evan, I gotta go. It's been a long day. So Aronofsky actually leaves. So who, of course, walks in 5 minutes later? Necro Butcher. So now I'm frantically calling Aronofsky.
Sure.
Darren, he's here. So Darren comes back, and the rest is history. They hit it off. So Necro Butcher's real name is Dylan, like Bob Dylan. Like he's like this sweet, soft-spoken guy,
Sure.
And interesting guy.
So real quick, since he's like the real guy, when you guys were filming the movie, did they like when he stapled the money on his?
That was real.
So he just did all that stuff real then.
Oh, you know. Yeah.
And you just filmed it like.
I'm not saying every single thing was real, but that was real, and the cinematographer was like bugging out, like, oh my god,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying it was a crazy project, and Aronofsky's not shy on improving and just going with the flow. Aronofsky's a real artist. And it was a wild experience. And
that's crazy. I mean, I don't doubt that they have wrestling matches like that, and you just confirm there's kind of like that.
Pull it up on YouTube. You can watch it all day. Just punching hardcore wrestling, Necro Butcher, Lowlife Louis Ramos, a guy, you know, there's Nic Cage, another guy, and you can watch that all day if you're interested. I mean,
not really. Yeah, that's a little too much for me, but because I was almost thinking, well, it's a movie. I wonder if they kind of exaggerate the stuff, but I'm like, it's such a realistic portrayal. Like, I'm almost thinking they don't, which.
Well, when your lung collapses, it's not exaggerated. I mean, Louis' lung collapsed during a match, and they had to do like a whole GoFundMe deal. And
wow.
yeah.
That's kind of sad, honestly. Like, you got to admit, as great of a movie The Wrestler is, you know, it's pretty depressing. And especially when he has that match, it's like he's doing this obviously for money. Like, I don't even think the Mickey Rourke character likes that kind of wrestling because he's more like used to the mainstream stuff from the 80s, like the WWF would have been. And he's doing this, like, basically almost killed him. He had his heart attack and all that. You know, it's really sad.
Yeah. But like I said earlier, wrestling is not great for longevity. A lot of these guys, Nikolai Volkov was a health nut, and he was gone at 71. I mean, back in the old days, they're performing in smoke-filled arenas. You know, they're on the road every night. You can't always eat healthy. You know, the show ends at 11:30 at night. You know, what's open? Maybe a fast food joint. You know, it's
yeah, that's true. No good home-cooked meals for them. Yeah.
Weren't home much. Period.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, Evan, do you know how Marisa Tomei got involved in the project?
Just a respected actress, very, very talented. I was just watching her in a foreign film with Isabelle Huppert the other day, and she's done Broadway, and she was willing to do what the role called for. You know, not everybody wants to do topless, not everybody wants to do sexy stuff, but she's an actress. I mean, she has headlined on Broadway. She's the real deal.
She's an amazing actress, a big name. I thought it was interesting because, you know, I think she was probably 43, 44 when they shot it. She's got such an amazing body, but it's almost weird to have like this, you know, big name, highly respected actress, and she's nude in so much of the film. Usually I could, like, a lot of younger actresses would do a role like that, right? But it's interesting to have somebody, you know, of her caliber and her age, but she looked incredible.
She knew how good the script was. And it's almost like Woody Allen. A lot of people just want to work with Aronofsky because
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Brilliant. And it's an opportunity to work with one of the. And again, you know, I haven't worked with him in 13 years, so it's not ass kissing. This is like a movie fan just showing respect.
Sure.
I mean, the guy's just brilliant. Even when something doesn't quite work, it's always worth seeing. Let's put it that way. Like any master, director. You know, Bergman has films that are better than other films. Fellini, Kurosawa, you know, all the greats. But you know, when Aronofsky's on, he's as good as anybody.
Sure. Let's go on to your other project, 350 Days, the documentary. Like, whose idea was it to create this? Because you're also an associate producer on this one as well. Make sure to check back later for part 2 of this interview, where we'll be taking a deep dive into that wrestling documentary, 350 Days.